Quo Vadis Svartpilen.
Naked bike, scrambler, or supermoto after all. We do not know exactly yet, but I will tell you what the new Svartpilen 801 from Husqvarna can do. Stay tuned. Quo Vadis means where are you going in Latin, and Svartpilen, as you already know, is the name of the black arrow in Swedish. The black arrow is back as an 801. For the first time there is a Svartpilen with 2 cylinders, because Husqvarna has taken quite a big step here from the 701 model, which had a really powerful super engine, those 690 genes, to now switch to the 2-cylinder platform, the LC8C platform. And with the 801, I think they've taken a real step forward. Whether it is now a scrambler, a naked bike, or still has superbike genes in it, we will perhaps find out in the end of the video. Hopefully we'll know more then. But first of all, I would like to take you through the technical data very briefly. Let's start with the heart. Let's start with the LC8C, the 799 cubic centimeter inline 2-cylinder. A familiar one, you might say. We know it from the 790 Duke. It produces 105 horsepower and has 87 Newton meters of maximum torque. From my point of view, it's a country road engine as it should be. That's all it needs. And I want to get the comments out of the way right away. Yes, this is an engine manufactured in China. Of course, from the same factory as the CF motor models, the cooperation has been going on for some time now. And now, for the first time in a Husqvarna, this 2-cylinder engine, which is produced in Asia, but Husqvarna is self-confident, stating service intervals of 15,000 kilometers. And I think that shows how convinced they are of the quality. With the first photos, the Svartpilen was already presented a few weeks ago. The guesswork immediately began on our site and under the YouTube video. Which components have been sourced from the KTM or Pilen mobility group? I did a live show with Howie about 2 weeks ago on the subject of the modular system. It would be stupid for Pilen Mobility or KTM if they really only developed parts for one model. There are cost reasons, there are also efficiency reasons, and at the end of the day it also benefits the customer, because these parts are then of course ordered in larger quantities, then manufactured, and you can then pass on more price distribution to the customer at the end of the day. If you're interested in the topic of construction kits and sliding parts policy in more detail, I recommend you watch the live show. At the press conference it was said that it has this, it has that, it has this, chassis, electronics and so on. And afterwards I went to a Husqvarna technician who I've known for a while and said to him, hand to heart, what's in it and what's really new? Because of course it has nothing to do with the 701, that's for sure. So the parts that are the same are perhaps screws and bolts and washers. But of course there is a lot here from other products in the KTM range. I've already mentioned the engine, which is probably the most striking part of the 790 Duke, but I thought there was more to it, and I was proven wrong, because it's actually only the swing arm and the brake hardware, or the brake discs front and rear, that has remained the same, and the brake pads have just been revised, adapted to the needs of the Svartpilen 801. And then we look at the next step. We have to go up a level in the KTM construction kit to the 990 Duke, which comes with a completely different price tag. Here we are too. Parts for the Svartpilen 801 have been dropped. This applies in particular to the fork hardware, although it has to be said that the spring rate, in other words, the springs are different, the spring rate is different, and the tuning is also different. But apart from that, WP Apex, that's where you reach into the shelf, and logically enough, Mattighofen also uses it for the Svartpilen, including the 990 Duke. And that really is the best in this class, I have to say, the electronics. And the electronics package is of course also matched to the performance here, matched to the suspension components here. It really is a crazy portfolio, what is possible and what is offered. I have to say that cornering, ABS and lean angle dependent traction control are included as standard. Husqvarna also includes the quick shifter as standard, which is called easy shift here. And then the dynamic mode comes into play. Otherwise I have the sport, rain and street modes. And if I select the dynamic mode, which costs 389 euros, And then I get access to the control of all the features, and we might go through them briefly now because there really is a lot. So I have this slide control, Husqvarna calls it, 9-stage adjustable, just how much slip is allowed on the rear wheel, that's included. And then also here with the shifting units, which are already known from the 990 Duke setup. Then we have anti-wheelie control, which is also adjustable in 5 stages. And the Supermoto ABS is included in all Svartpilen and Pilen models anyway. So there really is a lot possible here. Even with the throttle response, if you order the dynamic mode, you can still decide whether you want the throttle response from street mode, sport mode, or dynamic mode. This is even sharper. What is not possible is the situation with the throttle response from rain mode, because here you say if someone wants to drive dynamic, why would they want the throttle response from rain mode? And I can understand that. As I said, the engine is a good-natured fellow. It has a slightly rougher running culture down to 2500 RPM. And from 6500 upwards, you can feel slight vibrations on the tank. But apart from that, it's really exemplary in terms of linear power delivery. So you really have enough power right from the bottom. And this then increases continuously towards the end of the rev band. In my opinion, the engine is a real masterpiece. And with that, I'm already getting a bit into the driving impressions, because what does this dynamic mode do? I can combine the street throttle response, which I personally find the most successful for the vehicle, with the slip control, for example, the slip control of the dynamic mode. And that is recommended from my point of view, because otherwise the traction control intervenes a little too early. And in normal street mode, I can't separate the two otherwise. So this dynamic mode makes sense here. There is also a cruise control system that has to be fitted. It's an extra that I would definitely choose, just like the heated grips, which are available as an option. Otherwise, as is the case with Husqvarna, you can go wild with the accessories. This includes, for example, an exhaust system or the Pilen seat cover. And I would also like to mention the exhaust again and describe the sound to you a little. It is Euro 5B compliant, and you can kind of feel that. So it doesn't feel constricted at all in the power delivery. Only what reaches the ear, especially in the saddle, is really very restrained, I would almost say. This is due to these new standards which also regulate emissions in terms of volume. And that's a bit of a shame. If I remember last year's test, they're trying to inject a bit more emotion here than on the 790 Duke sister, because when I take my hand off the gas, I get that typical sputtering at low revs. That's quite cool. And apart from that, I have to say, for a standard rear silencer, it doesn't get much nicer than that in my opinion. And that brings me to the look. This Svartpilen, Black Arrow, we know the name says it all, is really very black. Almost a little too black for me. Why was this black chosen? Firstly, of course, because of the name, and I think it's also the Dark Street Explorer, which is how Husqvarna describes this vehicle, and it's supposed to look a bit dark and mystical. On the other hand, this black color also conceals the fact that the tank, if you look at it from the side, is great. A slim silhouette, just like we were used to with the 701. But when you sit on it, you realize that something has been done. I don't want to say it's massive, that might be too much to say, but it's much more present than was the case with the 701. And of course the black color helps to conceal this a little. Otherwise, the build quality. And here I have to say, yes, it comes from China, but it's top notch. It's really top notch, especially beautiful. My personal highlight here is the rear frame. They showed us this at the press conference. It's a cast aluminum part, unbelievably beautiful, including the air intakes on the side. They've really achieved something, and they also paid special attention to the presentation of the 801 lettering. It can be seen in many corners and ends of the model, including in the middle of the frame. The continuous part divides the driver's seat and pillion seat, and it's something that looks extremely high quality. It really does look like a vehicle that is perhaps 1 or 2 classes above it. This also runs through the entire bike, except, and I think this is a real shame, this exception. Here's the tank on top. This plastic outer skin, it doesn't feel on the same level as the motorcycle. And there's also the gap, which is if you press it, it gives way. There's also a small gap here, so I can't imagine if leaves fall in there in the fall, how you'll ever get them out again without taking the parts off. So that somewhat overshadows the otherwise absolutely fantastic overall impression. And yes, now I'd like to go a bit more into the driving impressions. Away from the engine, we've already discussed that, but now I'd like to talk about how it drives. What is it? Is it a scrambler? Is it a supermoto? Or is it a naked bike after all? And I'll say it a little in advance, it is a naked bike. And now I'll start by explaining to you from my point of view why it's no longer a scrambler. We do have a bit of a pseudo scrambler tire here. These are the ancient Pirelli MT60 RS. And I said that disrespectfully, but it's actually unbelievable how good the tire still is. I think this RS was recently added 10 years ago. The compound has changed a bit, but apart from that, the technology is really no longer the latest, and yet it still works. Today we were relatively fast on the roads here in the south of France. By the way, I have the highlights of this route with incredible views of Marseille. I've tracked a 12-kilometer section with Kali Moto. You're welcome to take a look. And the tire held up really well. You can tell when I'm provoking at the exit of a bend or when it's a slippery spot. I noticed once on manhole covers that it had less grip than with another tire. So there is still room for improvement. And now I've taken a long time to explain why I don't think it's a scrammer anymore. Yes, we have the stubby look. We also have an implied underbody guard by the engine. It really is a guard at the bottom. At the front, if you look at the exhaust manifold, it's open. This means that if a fat stone flies against it, it's a thing of the past, and the ground clearance is no longer the kind of thing that makes me want to go off-road. So 140 millimeters at the front, 150 millimeters at the rear. It's now also more on the naked bike side. We know this from the Duke, for example, which has the same suspension travel. And the last and biggest point is, if we move away from the chunky tires and don't let them blind us, these are normal naked bike dimensions. 120, 70, 17 at the front and 180, 55, 17 at the rear. This means that if I put a high performance, sporty, durable tire on it, perhaps a Power 6 or a Conti Street Sport Attack or Road Attack, I can certainly push even harder. From my point of view, this is very much a naked bike. What else do we have with us? A steering damper, which is fitted as standard at the front, and riding dynamics. We've really only been on the road today. That's why I want to describe it like this. So really, as I said, if you want to drive it off-road, I think a gravel road like the one I'm standing on here is of course no problem at all, and you can do it sometimes. But serious off-roading is just not possible. And that's why I'm sticking to the road driving impressions, and I have to say that the suspension is really on a good level. So that's when I think back to the 790. The rear shock absorber is adjustable in preload and rebound. At the front, we have a separate function fork, which means that the right and left can be adjusted separately. The rebound and compression stages in the fork. All in, just 5 clicks. That doesn't sound like much, but you already know it from other KTM Group models. This is the new philosophy. The idea is that the rider, the pilot, feels something immediately when they make a click adjustment here, and that the adjustment range is still the same. It has simply been divided into 5 stages and the response of the fork. And here Husqvarna has really chosen test routes today that really demand it. It's absolutely fine. The only thing it has a bit of a problem with is short bumps, roots and small potholes. It feels quite unflexible. I have to say that the shock absorber at the rear does a much better job, and on the bumpy roads we had today, it really did a top job. Ergonomically, the vehicle is absolutely balanced, I would say. We have a seat height of 820 millimeters. Maybe I'll show you that for a moment. I'll sit on it for a moment. To give you an idea, I'm 1.87 meters tall. I have plenty of room here. The knee angle is not too acute. This has been achieved by lowering the position of the footrests compared to the 701, and that's why it's still okay, even with my height. However, there is an accessory seat that raises the seat height by 25 millimeters. You can do it, but you don't have to. And to all those who might be worried that the lean angle has suffered as a result of lowering the footrest system, I can reassure you. We didn't manage to grind anything today. Even though we were riding really fast, it really is at a great level. In terms of driving dynamics, it's a real dream. And I would even go so far as to say that this vehicle, as it stands now, at the price you can buy it for, is not currently the best deal you can get from KTM or in the KTM universe, in my opinion. The most bike for the least price, so to speak. Speaking of prices, they are around 10,800 euros in Germany. Austrians have to make 12,200 euros loose thanks to the Nova. And for the Swiss, I think it's an unbelievable offer, 9,900 francs or 9,990. Don't nail me down here. I'll link you to all the exact prices in the description. And that's really unbelievable with the standard equipment it comes with, the handling, the level we're at here. That's a real step forward. And a step forward has also been made in terms of fuel consumption compared to the 701. And with the 701, fuel consumption was an issue depending on how much you drove. I wasn't that thirsty. But the problem was that the tank only held 9 liters. That gave us a maximum range of 200 kilometers, rather less. And that problem is now more or less solved. So we have a range of 300 kilometers if you take it easy. Husqvarna officially states a fuel consumption of 4.5 liters. Incidentally, we have 91 decibels of static noise and CO2 emissions of 106 grams. So that's all very humane, and I would say is absolutely normal for the class. And that gives us a range of more than 250 kilometers. I would like to tell you a very funny anecdote towards the end. The Husqvarna team accompanied us here today, and 2 brave riders were allowed to ride a Husqvarna together, and the one behind was the cameraman. And 2 things struck me, because I thought to myself, who would have the idea of driving this vehicle in pairs? Firstly, the colleague on the back was about 180 meters and somehow didn't moan. It didn't look completely bad. And then, because I was interested, I looked at the registration certificate, because the official weight on the website is 181 kilograms, ready to drive without fuel. So it's a dry weight, so to speak. But I always don't do much with this information. The registration certificate says 191, and now brace yourselves, a permissible vehicle, total weight of 435 kilos. That means we have a payload of 244 kilos for the motorcycle. In other words, 2 people can really sit on it together, and the seating comfort of this seat is really, really good. Looking at the pictures, it looks extremely flat and poorly padded, but that's wrong. It's really absolutely fine. We were on the road here for 240 kilometers today, and my backside doesn't hurt. So these, and I think the colleague with the camera may have shown a certain capacity for suffering or been very well paid. I don't know, but he certainly finished the day well with us. The only thing at the back that is a bit unworthy is the pillion grab handle. It's not a handle. The rear end has a really nice slim design. You have to remove the pillion seat, and then it is screwed on the inside with 2 screws, and then a kind of steel cable comes out. It's covered in black, and you have to hold onto it like a toy horse, which still looks a bit strange. But I think if you're riding in pairs, you're more likely to hold on to the person in front without it. So, Quo Vadis Svartpilen, Quo Vadis Husqvarna. What is it now? Is it a scrambler? From my point of view, no, I've already explained. Supermoto, it's quite light. 190 kilos is not the world, but the riding position is no longer supermoto-like. Compared to the Dukes, I just can't get as far forward on the handlebars. I prefer this Husqvarna logo, which by the way is such a soft material here that if you brake hard, the best parts of the man here don't smash against the tank. It looks a bit strange and takes some getting used to, but it actually makes functional sense. Speaking of the brakes, I forgot to mention them before. In the riding impressions, they are inconspicuous. It doesn't have a mega sharp initial bite. It's certainly not a 1-finger brake, but you can manage really well with 2 fingers, decelerates properly, and is absolutely appropriate for the class. So now I've come quite a long way from where I actually wanted to go. We asked ourselves whether this is still a supermoto, and I say a clear no. That means only the naked bike is left. And is that a classic naked bike now? According to the definition, I think so. So it's a successful naked bike, and with naked bikes in Svartpilen, many people are now thinking, well, is there perhaps a Pilen coming? Husqvarna is currently keeping a secret, but when I look at the rest of their portfolio and what they have done in the past, the chances of a Pilen are not bad. The Svartpilen now has a nice independence, but there are certainly still points here and there where it could be made even more naked bike-like. Of course, you can also play with the tires and put something sporty on it. So there is room for a Pilen model 801 for those who want to make it a bit more scrambler-like, and that's my conclusion now. There's the option of spoked rims. That's coming at the end of the year, or in the middle end of the year, you don't really know. Also, because it has 105 horsepower, there will be an L version, which is for A2. That might be interesting for our Swiss friends. If you make it suitable for A2, it will only have 95 horsepower when open, so that's still to come. Otherwise, please write below what you think of this Svartpilen 801. What do you think of Husqvarna's move to install a 2-cylinder? Do you mourn the loss of the big single cylinder? And if so, why didn't you buy it? Because I think that was one of the main reasons why they decided on this platform. Otherwise, give me a thumbs up if you liked the video. Let me know underneath who we should put them up against, because I think competition classification is a damn difficult topic, and I'm looking forward to your answers. So there might be something like the Ducati Scrambler icon, which is significantly weaker. You could think of a Triumph Scrambler, but it doesn't really fit. The 790 Duke would be the naked bike equivalent, if you like. There are a few possibilities, just let me know. As I said, you can still customize the vehicle visually. I was also asked whether this front fly screen here is removable. Yes, it is. So I think that this will go down well in the customizer scene. There is also the rear pillion cover. You can remove the footrests for the pillion. So there are countless possibilities, and I'm really putting an end to that now. Thank you for your attention, and goodbye.